and thank you for joining us for Lifetime's webinar for adoptive parents. My name is Kim King, and my co-host is Libby Murray. Tonight we're excited to answer the questions that are on your minds. We have a few questions already written down to get us started, but feel free to start typing in any questions that you have on your minds that you were hoping to discuss with us tonight. Just to cover a few details for contacting Lifetime, if you are brand new to Lifetime, I would recommend filling out your free application on our website, and that's at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. If you are just starting to get to know us, you can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/open.adoption. And you are always welcome to call in and speak with us one-on-one. If you do not have a coordinator yet, just go ahead and call in and share a little about yourself, what state you're from, and we'll make sure that you get a coordinator who can answer questions and start guiding you through the steps based on where you are in your process. The phone number is 1-800-923-6784. You are also welcome to email us. If you already have a coordinator, of course, then her email address is just her first name, such as mine would just be Kim, K-I-M, at lifetimeadoption.com, or you can email to apply, A-P-P-L-Y, at lifetimeadoption.com. So, Libby, thank you for being here and planning on our webinar tonight and for the beautiful little graphic you've made for our Q&A session.
Oh, and I loved putting that graphic together, too, because the adoptive mom of this darling little baby recognized it on our Facebook page, and she said, hey, I know that baby. The baby is 3 now, so that was really fun. But I'm glad to see so many familiar faces settling in here, but also some new people, and I just want to welcome all of you. And one of the things that I love about doing these Q&As regularly is that sometimes it's impossible to think of everything you should ask, and by listening to even general information sometimes sparks a new question or a new approach or a new perspective that maybe you hadn't thought to even consider yet. And so all of you are helping each other too. So I really want to encourage our audience, whether you're already working with Lifetime or if you are joining us and maybe you've only just heard about Lifetime because you found out about this webinar and this is the first time you've ever reached out to us. Type in whatever questions are on your mind tonight. We will try and answer as many as we can on air, but also we do our best to type with you as silently as possible while the webinar is going on, to just try and make sure that you get as much direction as you can before you hang up on tonight's call. But like Kim said, you know, we are here to answer questions for you one-on-one as well. And I always encourage people, even if you feel like, gosh, I know I've asked this before, but I don't get it, or I just need to go over it again. Maybe you're like me, and when it comes to really, really important decisions, you like to hash it out several times and hear answers over and over so that you can make sure you weren't making up something that you fell asleep dreaming about, or that you heard from someone else, that you really understand, no, this is how it works with them, or this is what I can expect in my adoption future. Because truly what we see is families who embrace these educational opportunities, such as the webinars, and that they stay on top of the latest information and they prepare themselves as much as possible, they usually have a smoother time through the process, just mostly I think because they're less surprised by the ups and downs or the requirements or the needs as they're moving through those very sensitive moments of their personal match too. So I'm so glad to see a variety of people here tonight, and I look forward to seeing what comes up. This is a great place to start, Kim, with where's your agency located and can you work with Michigan? Or, you know, we could fill in any blank with another state's name.
Yes, yes, we do work with Michigan. I think pretty much at this point, the only state we cannot assist in is New York State adoptive parents. But if you're listening to this as a recording in the future at some point, that may have changed. But for now, that's the way it stands. We work with birth moms nationwide, except for, I think, New Mexico, but I'm not sure if that's the most up-to-date info. But if you are in any state other than New York State, then we are legally able to assist. In what capacity depends on what state you're in. So Marty Caldwell, our founder, she has an office in Northern California and an office in Florida as well. So it just depends on what state you're in and what your state allows. So if your state only allows you to work with a licensed agency, then you have to work through the Florida office. If your state allows you to work with a facilitator, then you are able to work with the California office. Either way, it is the same structure and the same program that has been successful for going on 30 years this January.
I was just reflecting on that the other day with another part of Lifetime's team, and it's just sort of amazing. And this year, I know we're already in March, but this year already feels like it's flying. And while we're on the note of how fast time goes, I mean, this really is time of year when spring is coming, the weather changes, people start to get more active, their schedules fill up a little bit more. And I like to encourage people who are just starting to think about adoption, or if they've had a step in their adoption that they've needed to complete, that they not put it off just because life is picking up a little bit of a faster pace. Make goals for yourself with your timeline, set reminders so that you don't take more time than is necessary to get where you want to go with your adoption goals.
Yep, absolutely.
There's a good follow-up question that says, how do we know our state requirements? And really some of these, every family we work with sometimes has unique circumstances too. Like there was another great question on here about, right now we live in one state, but we want to move. And that there's variables playing into that is they're trying to decide, is this the best time for our move? Should we move for the benefit of our adoption? Sometimes those questions might be a little bit easier for us to answer one-on-one with you, or for us to get your application in process so that we can truly understand what are your personal goals and needs through adoption, because sometimes that might also not necessarily change the answer, but we can better customize the answer so that you have clarity. But one thing I do like to tell people is whether they are already working with Lifetime or if they're thinking about moving before they start an adoption plan, we did learn, what was it, I think it was the end of last month, so probably about 4 weeks ago, we had a home study webinar, a focused webinar just about home studies with Linda, part of our team. She's a home study expert, and she brought up a great point that most states require you live as a resident of that state for a certain amount of time before you can even begin a home study. So sometimes families need to take into consideration how fast they want to get started with their adoption search, and decide, maybe that'll weigh into your goals for moving. Some people don't get a say. They just have to move, for a job, or if they're in the military, or if they get a great opportunity on housing, or they have to help family, But if you're at the front end and you're thinking, we're facing a big move out of state soon, you might also think about, okay, I'm going to need to find out how soon I could even start adoption once I move. And we can sometimes help you get some of those more specific answers, too, if you reach out to us personally.
And there is a question here about taxes as well. The federal tax credit with Amy had mentioned the question about Ohio. She said Ohio has a state tax adoption credit or something. I'm not too familiar with that, and that's probably a good thing, because you would really need to talk with a tax professional, because even if I was to look it up on the IRS.gov website, I may not be interpreting the terminology correctly, and I may not know all the ins and outs of your specific circumstances. I don't know if you can use a state one and a federal one. I mean, I don't know, but I believe the federal tax credit sits at about $13,000 that families who qualify can then apply for that after they've completed their adoption is my understanding. But whether or not you qualify it, I think that depends on your taxable income, et cetera. So it gets a little bit like out of our realm of questions to answer. So I would recommend contacting a tax person who can look into this for you and let you know how the figures would play out so that you can make a good informative decision financially as to whether or not you're going to move and how that would impact financially your adoption.
Mm-hmm. And while we're on the topic of credits and different ways of looking at how to fund adoption, we don't talk about it very much anymore, Kim, but it's a good tip to remember that some employers offer adoption incentives or reimbursements or even allowances. And even if your employer doesn't offer those right now, sometimes it's very easy for a company to add those in. So there are all kinds of things that can play into helping you reach your adoption goals financially too. And those are some of the things that Kim was talking about that we can also help you discover when you reach out. Because again, not every family's situation is the same, and sometimes the states vary too, like we just discovered with this, that there are some states that actually offer a state adoption credit. And then, of course, there are many of you on the call who are thinking, like, that's a thing? So,
right.
So we can help too.
I would say it's not as common, though. It's not as common for a state.
No,
so don't be disappointed. Don't be too surprised if your state doesn't have one. I think it's more of the exception.
Yes. But, I mean, while we're on that topic, too, you and I actually were talking earlier this week, and we were going to bring up, I have seen the Internet just boom with opportunities, greater and easier opportunities for families to either continue growing their adoption budget or to come up with the funds initially. And you actually work a lot with the families on that side of things too, Kim, but I know that, for instance, there's some websites like Pure Charity. Oh gosh, two other websites I meant to mention, and now they're escaping my mind.
Okay, let's talk about Pure Charity for a couple minutes here, because Pure Charity is really a great avenue for families to make their adoption funding goals, make other people aware of it, help increase that awareness, and give others the opportunity to contribute to something worthwhile that they want to support you, and they are personally invested in you reaching your goals and becoming parents through adoption or growing your family through adoption. PureCharity.com, and we spell it pure, P-U-R-E, as in pure vanilla ice cream. I don't know. But anyway, PureCharity.com. I guess you guys know where my head is in the ice cream realm. But PureCharity.com, if you go there, you can easily set up your own personal profile there, and then it gives you the ability to share that on social media and really encourage people to, if they're going to do one thing good for that day, just share this on your page. Tweet it, Instagram, I don't know, Facebook it, whatever social media you have. Encourage others in your social network to share that, and then that way they'll encourage their friends and family to share it, and you never know who might want to contribute. And basically you set the financial goal on there, and you can put information about the reasons why you're adopting, kind of some of your adoption goals, what you're looking for in your adoption, maybe the things that you're already doing to fund your adoption, and you can even put a video up there to make you stand out from the crowd. You can add photos to it. The basic profile only takes a few minutes to set up, so don't let the fancy options of adding a video or cool photos, don't let that deter you. Just set it up, PureCharity.com, just set it up. If you do not see a partner on there on PureCharity.com that you would like to use, you can use Lifetime Foundation. If you're a Lifetime family, then obviously you'll select Lifetime Foundation as your partner. And if you are sort of out there on your own, you are welcome to choose Lifetime Foundation as your partner, because Lifetime Foundation is a nonprofit 501c3 organization that our founder Marty Caldwell also founded to be able to help birth moms and adoptive families. So you are part of the adoption community, and we want to support you, so you can choose Lifetime Foundation as your partner, even if you're not a Lifetime family, have no intentions of becoming a Lifetime family. But you do need to choose a partner, because all the people who donate, they get a tax write-off. It's tax deductible if you do it through Pure Charity. So, and there's no limit to the amount. I don't believe there's a limit that you can receive as a donation, and then they can get those as tax write-offs. And then what you would do is, when you are ready to have those funds put toward your program, your home study, your legal, your plane tickets, your whatever it may be, say you've already paid for your adoption by then and you're like, oh my gosh, I have $2,000 in my Pure Charity account. Well, just contact Lifetime, and we hit the button on Pure Charity, and they send us a check, and then we in turn write a check to wherever it needs to be sent to. So if it's for the contractor because you added a room for the new baby that you just adopted, or because it's for your home study or whatever, we will send the check to whomever. Or if it's towards your program at Lifetime, of course, then that's really easy for us to do. But Pure Charity is amazing, because you can put it out there, and that can be out there building your adoption fund 24/7. So I hope everyone will set one of those up and feel welcome to use Lifetime Foundation as their partner. Lifetime Foundation does not receive anything from this, so this is not a commercial, but we're just really excited that this is something families can actually do and use. Now, from what I understand, they do have a service charge of 5%, but when you think of the bigger scheme of things, when you're inviting people to contribute, you want it to be easy and tax deductible. So there's nothing easier than entering your card information online and hitting donate. You know, I mean, I know whenever I have friends that offer that opportunity, whether it's a child's fundraiser or something that they're trying to do for a friend or family member, and they have a GoFundMe or something, it's really easy to contribute, and I can just go get my wallet, fill in my info, and I'm done, and I feel really good that I contributed. So you can have that up there and running for you. And if you think about 5%, at first it might seem like a lot, but really out of $100, you're still getting $95 towards your adoption. That's awesome. And you know, because they're using a card, there is a merchant fee, I'm pretty sure. So I think that's part of why they have a percentage withheld. But it's, I think, 5%. Anyway, let me know if you guys have questions about that.
That even, like if they are, say they already have their funds for Lifetime ready, so they are ready to start, or maybe they're already working with Lifetime, this is still even something you'd encourage all people to look into, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
That's awesome. It's so cool. And this is what we love, is that we actually learn about a lot of these things through some of you. And so if you have feedback about it, I mean, we would love to hear from you too, just so that we can continue making it clearer and easier to understand. Or if you know of other programs that worked for you. We are always open to just knowing what has helped people reach their goals, because, you know, the reality is, I mean, some people say there is such thing as, you know, no-fee adoption when you do foster care, but even then, most foster families will tell you that they had at least a little bit of expenses to cover, but also, you know, that comes from our taxes. So essentially, it's just when it comes down to those fees, it's not laid out in the same way as it is when you, say, adopt internationally or adopt privately through the U.S. So the reality is that just like if you were to give birth, you want to work with professionals that are going to help you bring your baby home. So, you know, whereas if you were pregnant, you would be working with doctors and hospitals and nurses. When you're adopting, you're working with those experts and professionals, the attorneys, the counselors, the social workers that are needed to bring your baby home too. And we never we never want a family to feel like adoption is impossible just because they're not already sitting on those funds. And just to reassure all of you, it is very, I don't want to say very rare, but it's not as common for us to hear from hopeful adoptive parents who are already, you know, sitting on or have saved up and set aside the funds to adopt. Most people are combining efforts through different tax credits, grants, savings, selling things, doing fundraisers, employer benefits, the options like Kim was saying, involving your friends and family to put in little by little, it eventually becomes a big fund. And so don't be discouraged if you're on the call and you're thinking that's really the one thing standing between me and starting adoption is I'm really not sure how to get there financially. Reach out anyways because we've heard it before. Other families have been where you are, and there is an answer for most people.
And I saw a question earlier that I was like jumping out of myself to answer. It was about military family and how do we work with military families and deployments, etc. So one thing that reminded me of this question was if you are a military family, you have resources such as USAA, Navy Federal Credit Union. There are banks and credit unions geared toward families in your circumstances that you can apply for funding. We've had quite a few families over the years get USAA to provide the loan or whatever product they called it at the time for their adoption. There's also a place called Lightstream that we have a flyer to share with you about Lightstream. If you have used the link in our flyer and you got approved for a loan, I believe the Lifetime Foundation gets a donation of $50. So that's cool. So if you want the flyer for Lightstream, if you don't already have it, email me, kim@lifetimeadoption.com. Or if you can't understand what I'm saying when I say purecharity.com, or you're like, what was that website again? Just email me and I'll email you a link to it. But here is, well, where's the question go? Something about military. Libby, do you see it? It's up there. Oh, there it is. Do you work with military families, and how do you handle deployment situations during the adoption process? Well, there are a couple things that you can do if you are in, yes, we work with military families. Yes, we work with military families who are stationed abroad as well. And we can talk with you about how that would work and impact your adoption opportunities as well. And over the years, our military adoptive parents have been very successful. I think part of the reason is because of their readiness, that is just a way of life, as well as for the couples who are military couples, whether it's one spouse or both in the military, they have that communication that is so necessary to hold a marriage together, whether one spouse is in the military or if it's a dual military couple. So the good communication and being able to make a decision decisively, in a timely manner, and the readiness, because in our program, families are considered on call, that if you're active, you can get an opportunity at any time, and you might have your baby in your arms by that following day or something. So, but as far as when deployments arise, there are a couple of options. The one is you would be able to possibly get a power of attorney so that you can still be available to adopt, and if you have an opportunity while your spouse is not physically present, you have that power of attorney. Or a lot of deployments these days, they still have technology. They still have scanners, faxes, emails, phones. It's not like the old days of deployments where they were just completely out of touch. And a lot of the cases, some cases they are still, it's harder to reach the service member. But many times they have like a home base camp where they can go, and there's like a computer lab basically to where they can still sign documents and everything. But getting a power of attorney is highly recommended. I think that if you are a military family, you should just have that for your adoption. Maybe it's like a special power of attorney. As a military family, you already know what I'm talking about. And then the other option is that if you just really are not ready to adopt during this deployment, use the hold option. Freeze everything until your spouse returns and then reactivate. So actually our hold option, it is now available to all families, whether civilian or military, but in the old days, of Lifetime over 10 years ago, it was originally started. The hold option was originally offered specifically for military families because we had military families deploying for the first Gulf War.
Right.
And that is why it's a 9-month freeze option. Not because it takes 9 months for a baby to be born, but because many times deployments are 9 months.
And that's something, too, if you are researching adoption professionals, ask them what happens if you have to put your plans on hold, whether it's because you're moving or because of deployment or a family emergency, but also find out what happens if you welcome a baby home either through a pregnancy or through an adoption outside of that program, because not all adoption centers honor the ability to put your plans on hold with them and then pick it up and continue your search when you're ready again. And you just want to make sure that you understand, how to proceed if something comes up. Because there are all kinds of situations. We can't always list them all because it's just impossible, the hypothetical possibilities that are out there that could come in the way of you being able to move forward with adoption. Another good one is sometimes families are foster parents at the same time that they're waiting to permanently adopt. And so if you are offering your home and your heart as a temporary stable solution for a child, you want to explore, will your county allow you to pursue an adoption match for a private adoption while you have a child in your home? Or will you need to put your plans on hold for foster care or for the private adoption while you are there for this foster child or while you're open to the search? Just find these things out so that you're not surprised later and thinking, oh man, my hands are tied. Now we can't go in that direction, or now I have to start over, or whatever it is. Not all professionals offer the same services. So you just want to make sure you know what you're working with there.
Yes, and I was talking with a family several years ago, and she said that she had a mix-up in communication when she told her social worker that they were going to be pursuing private adoption. Come to find out, her social worker totally closed them out, thinking, oh, well, then they surely don't want to adopt through us anymore, so we won't send them any more, we won't service them anymore as far as possibly adopting any of the children that are available. So just be very clear that if you are pursuing both, make sure that your social worker does know that, not your lifetime social worker, but like your foster adoption social services social worker, make sure that they know and you're very clear that you want all adoption opportunities, not just the private adoption one. If there is an opportunity that they have for you, you are on board with that. So just be very clear about your intentions with them so there's no misunderstanding. One other quick note, thank you, Sherry, for mentioning this. The military, from what I understand and what Sherry understands here too, is that there is a reimbursement of $2,000 for an adoption, like one of our typical adoptions here through Lifetime. I think it's slightly different if you adopt special needs or something, but for our typical case, it's not special needs, and they do a $2,000 reimbursement. We actually have a whole tip sheet on funding ideas as well, other ideas that families have used over the years to fund their adoption, mainly financing ideas or ways to work with what they already had, such as selling off a vehicle, maybe getting an extra part-time job for a short period of time. If you would like to receive that one-page report, just email us. My email is kim@lifetimeadoption.com, and I'll be happy to email that over to you. It's a PDF. There was a question earlier about the general cost of adoption. What frame of reference can families expect if they're brand new and have no idea what private adoption costs, maybe didn't even know that foster adoption is very low cost for the services involved directly in the adoption. I saw a report today that came across my email, and it said that it was like 2012, 2013, I think, families who participated in the survey, if it was foster adoption, I think they spent under a few thousand for specific things related to the cost of their adoption. That doesn't mean that they didn't have other expenses for the child or anything, but it was very low cost out of pocket. And for private adoption, whether they used an adoption professional or found a birth mom on their own, both groups of families reported somewhere between 20 and 40 to 45,000. I would say we sit about in the middle as far as an overall budget. What would be a good, how do you know if you are a match financially for adopting through Lifetime? I would say shooting for about a $30,000 budget is ideal, because that's going to make sure that you are ready to move forward with any case, regardless of what the state requires for legal services, where birth mom is, if they require 1 attorney, 2 attorneys, an agency in that state to do the legal work. You have that budget ready, you've paid for your program at Lifetime, and you've been able to afford your home study. So that would be the figure I would shoot for. It doesn't mean you have to have it all at once and right away, because Rome wasn't built in a day, and there are things that you can start to work on, and you can talk with us and plan the timing and let us know kind of what you're working with financially, so that we can tell you, well, here are some steps that I would recommend, or here is a path that I would recommend for the time being. The truth is that the majority of families do some sort of financing to fund their adoption, and usually start to pay that off when they complete the adoption and get the tax credit back.
Exactly. And like I said, we've had a few questions. This is a good question. I was going to type in an answer, but might as well just answer it. How important is our current disposable income to the process? And, a lot of people, for instance, I know of several families who have had money gifted to them to complete their adoptions, but on average, they don't have a ton of disposable income, and they live in modest, average homes and have average jobs and drive cars that may be paid off, or they might have a car payment every month. Just sort of average. And we had a great question about that come up when we did our home study webinar last month. And I loved the way Linda talked about it, and she just said, it's really not about how much you make. It's about, do you have the means to add a mouth to your life? Do you have the means to take care of a child and feed them? And it's beyond just space for a baby, but they're going to look at your tax records. They're going to look at your average income and how you manage your money. One person I remember on the webinar asked if we are currently on assistance, like if you get help with WIC or food stamps or some kind of financial aid through your state or the government, could they qualify? And the reality, I believe the way she explained it was, bottom line was, not typically, but there have been circumstances where a family has been approved just because it's been things out of their control, but it was a very temporary situation. So sometimes it's case by case, but not to get discouraged. The same thing kind of falls in. We had another question here about what is the age limit of the adoptive parents, and that I would say those are like two of the biggest concerns we hear about is, am I too old or do I make enough to adopt? And the reality is, most of the time when people are asking those questions, they fall well within the average, you're fine range.
Yes.
So, to speak to the age question, on average, most of the parents that are adopting these days are in their late 30s and through their 40s, but some of them are even in their 50s, and then certainly we're working with younger couples too more and more, especially as more adoption awareness grows. We're seeing even younger couples that are saying, we just have a heart to adopt, or, we just don't want to wait. We don't want to take 10 to 15 years to find out if we're going to continue having miscarriages or infertility, and we'd rather start now. There's so many different reasons that lead people to adoption at different times. But you have to pass a home study. So, let's say you're in your 60s, a home study provider might not approve you to adopt a newborn. But in some circumstances they might, so we're not always the judge of that. We're looking at your application as a whole. But the bottom line is you're legally going to have to be approved to adopt by a licensed home study provider in your state. So sometimes those questions are a little bit out of our control.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And, you know, the truth about age when you're on the older end of adoptive parents, and I would say that's like above 52-ish, you'd be on the older end of adopting parents. So it doesn't mean that it's too late for you to adopt just because you are this age. But what I would recommend is really getting on the ball, being very proactive, and getting things in motion as soon as possible because, you know, you're working with a smaller window of time than the other couples. And you want to make sure that you're working with a place that has had success for adoptive families within your age bracket. It's not just about your age, though. I mean, for us, if we see an applicant that, you know, one spouse or both is 52, 53 years old, we're not just only looking at the age. We're also looking at other families who are already in our program. You know, how many of our current families have this age in common? And are we seeing that it's causing them to wait longer, or are we seeing that it's not impacting anything? And maybe we only have a couple, so sure, we have an opening available, but let's look at this family now, you in particular. Okay, you're 52, 53 years old. What are your preferences? If your preferences are only to adopt a purple polka dotted, you know, child with two heads, then we're probably not going to be able to assist. But if your preferences are, I want a healthy baby, you know, any race or very open on race, you know, I'm looking for a newborn, but I'm open to a little older as well, I'm open to siblings, you know, that gives us more room to present you to a variety of birth moms, you know, but as a family is very, very specific, and they have a limiting factor such as age. Being over 50, I would say, would constitute a limiting factor. We need to make sure that if we're offering to assist here at Lifetime, that there is a balance of plenty of opportunities to be shown to birth moms.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in your 40s, please don't worry that you're too old to adopt. Please don't worry about that.
I was just talking with a friend, I think it was last night, or sometime this week's run together, but adoption, you know, really comes to this place of vulnerability. Both the birth mother and adoptive parents are coming from this place of, will I be accepted? And we understand that putting yourselves out there in this way, just even to learn about adoption, opens you up to so many maybe insecurities you thought you dealt with or that maybe you never had before, because people talk about adoption, but they don't always talk about adoption accurately. And so when you have people in your life that might be more familiar with the way adoption was 30, 40 years ago, or maybe they're only familiar with adoption because of what they see with celebrities on TV or they see on sensational talk shows or something, they might ask you questions that put fears in your mind, like, oh my goodness, I never thought about that. Like, yeah, we are in our 40s and we've only been married a few years. I mean, will we even qualify? I never even thought of that before. Try and take deep breaths and know usually those are the kinds of questions just meant to hold you back, and they're not really roadblocks after all. But it's always good to vent those, get answers so you know what you're dealing with, because the other side of that is if you're weighing out whether you want to adopt overseas, out of country, sometimes, yes, those countries have age limitations and other requirements. So it is a good question to ask, but don't let it hold you back from asking. Sometimes I've met people that just sort of assumed, oh, I'm sure I'm too old and it's too late to even try. And then the reality is, no, if you had asked, 5 years ago when you were actually beginning to think that question, the answer might have opened up a ton more opportunities than you have now. So it's so good to have these questions out and open. Another great question, I actually typed it in, but for those of you who are just listening, another great question was, do we have to own a home to get approved to adopt? And no, actually the founder of Lifetime, when she began her adoption search, she rented, and she lived in an apartment, I believe, if I remember the story right. So there's just all kinds of families. One of the cool things I remember was working on a profile with a family who lived in sort of a cool downtown apartment in a city. And I forget where they were, but so they didn't have the traditional photo of the front of their house with this lovely driveway and a little green yard. They had, an apartment building among a busy downtown area. And so they just highlighted what that offers their life. We get to walk most places. We have restaurants nearby, cool parks around the corner, around the block. So you don't have to fit in a box to adopt successfully. In fact, most birth mothers, love that there's just such a variety of all of you. You have different dynamics, different lifestyles, some of you live in the country, some of you live in the mountains, some of you live on the ocean. We've been working on updating our iPhone app for birth mothers, and I've been having to kind of go through the different regions, because that's one way that birth mothers search for adoptive parents is maybe I've grown up in California my whole life, but I could absolutely imagine my baby living on a horse ranch in the middle of Kansas or something. So don't assume things. Just keep reaching out step by step. Find out, because chances are there's a birth mom looking for a family just like you who lives in a way that you live.
And just like there is a birth mom who is looking for a family just like you, Libby, we were talking about, a family just figuring out what they're looking for in their adoption and choosing the right adoption professional who's out there who is the best fit to meet the needs that you have. So, I mean, oftentimes we're contacted by families that they just love Lifetime. They just love us, love us, love us, have been watching us for years, reading the blog, attending the webinars. They've read Called to Adoption from our founder, Marty Caldwell and Heather Featherston, and they want to adopt with Lifetime. But then you see their application and they're only seeking an older child, and that is a very small, minute percentage of adoptions that we see. Mainly what we see is newborn adoptions, because we're mainly working with women while they're in the pregnancy stage, in an unplanned pregnancy, and they want to choose a mom and dad or maybe a single adoptive mom for their child. And so we're mainly seeing 95 to 97% newborn. Would we volunteer to assist the family with only pursuing older adoption? It's not as likely, because that need is not the majority of what we see, if that makes sense. So what I was saying to Libby is that it's really important for families to first kind of like know what you're looking for in your adoption, know what you're willing to move forward with, and what you know is outside of the box of what you know you're okay with, and make those decisions. Still be open to learning more and growing your preferences, but have an idea of what direction you're going to take, and find the place to where what you're looking for is the norm of what they see in their adoptions, rather than trying to work with a place where what you are looking for is the exception and the rarity in their program. And there are thousands of adoption professionals all across the country, and many different paths to adoption, such as foster adoption, where you are more likely to have an older child. So if you're thinking, I don't really want to start over with a newborn, well, maybe foster or international adoption are good solutions, especially if you're looking for siblings. I think it's a little more common with international and foster adoption. If you're more so looking for an infant and you want to hopefully be there from the very beginning, and that's just something that's really important for you based on the path you've already been through, perhaps, then most likely a domestic voluntary relinquishment is going to be the best path, because with foster adoption, it's more common that you don't know right away if a child is available for adoption. First they have to work it out and see if there's any family, biological family for the child, or if the birth parent rehabilitates and is then able to parent before they terminate parental rights involuntarily. But if you have a birth mom who's voluntarily choosing adoption, most likely the bigger portion of birth moms choosing adoption voluntarily are doing so at a very young age or during pregnancy. They're wanting to plan the adoption. But we still also need to know which families are open to a little bit older, and because every now and then we may see that case where, for example, what if we have a 2- and a 4-year-old, well, we need to know which families are open to that. And if a family has their heart set on a newborn, really think about what that means. Does that mean you definitely are not willing to adopt a baby just because they are 2 or 3 months old? Is your answer yes or no? I mean, really think about it. Look around and see babies that are 2 or 3 months old. What stage are they at developmentally? And really, is that an opportunity that you would really not want to have? Would you really want to miss that opportunity? And really see the ways that you can stretch, because I mean, the more broad your preferences are, the more birth moms are going to be able to look at your profile. And I think it's really only good to broaden your preferences if you and your spouse both know that you're 100% on board with that preference. So that way you're not in the position of having to reject a birth mom who is already getting excited about you guys and already envisioning her child with you and thinking, oh, this is the answer to my prayer that, there's a set of parents like this who are open to adopting my baby, and now she's wanting to match with you, but then there's hesitation on your part. So, of course, only broaden your preference if you are truly ready to move forward with a case like that. If you're thinking about broadening your preferences, definitely contact us to talk about that if you're already in the program or getting ready to start your program. Broadening preferences is always welcomed. It's only narrowing down preferences that tends to pose more of a concern.
Well, and that it's really wise advice that you brought up, Kim, because sometimes, well, we had a great question earlier that said, on average, how many applications do you approve into your program? And the reality is we get a lot of applicants, but we can only accept so many per month because we're also trying to keep a balance. It wouldn't make sense for us to work with 500 adoptive families and only be hearing from 100 birth mothers at any given time. So we really try and look at, do we have space in our program right now for not only just for an adoptive family, but also based on what you're looking for. So, like, for example, right now, we do have openings in our program for families of all backgrounds and for families who have different search criteria in mind. But in particular, I know because I've been on a call a lot lately, we do have several birth mothers of African American background that are looking for families that share race in common. And so some of you might have even seen on Facebook, that we've been putting out there trying to increase, just the awareness of the need for more African American or mixed race couples to adopt these children because these birth mothers are looking for them. So sometimes, we might have room based on what you're looking for. A good example I always go to is, like I also took a call this weekend from someone who was looking only for a girl. And we can't bring in a heavy majority of families that are only looking for girls, because then who will we have to adopt the boys or to be available for the gender not yet known situation?
Or a birth mom choosing not to learn the gender, which we are seeing more. It's like a trend we're seeing, yeah.
And so it all comes down to a balance, because we know birth moms are looking for, some things to be in common among the parents, but they're looking for just the right fit for their baby. But that there are also so many amazing people like all of you that want to adopt, and you have a different dream in mind. Each one of you has a different vision, and some of you might have visions slightly in common, but your adoption is going to be so unique. And so we really try and look at this balance. And so whenever you're researching an adoption professional, like, keep in mind that you want them to be up front with you and clear about whether or not they believe you'll be successful based on what they're seeing actively in their program at the time. And for those of you on the call who are waiting with Lifetime, I always like to just remind you that if you are accepted into our program, it's because we do believe you're going to be successful. You will be chosen by these birth mothers. And then if you're on the call, I know there's a few of you on the call who have applied, and you continue to be faithfully attending our webinars, but you maybe are on a wait list because you're waiting for a spot to open up so that there is room for a family like you who has a specific search in mind. and just know that we will be clear with you. We're not just looking at applications and going, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, with frivolous reasons in mind. We're looking at it as, can we be fair to this family and know with confidence they will adopt? You know, that we don't want to accept someone into our program with hesitancy. We want to accept them and be excited to see how their story is going to unfold. Because the reality is, and I was just, gosh, this kind of takes me back to a part in a book I was reading with my Bible study this week. But, you know, if we were to say yes to every single family, it could potentially keep them from a program that's even better for them. And so if you apply and Lifetime's not the right fit for you, don't be discouraged, because truly what I see that as is a stepping stone, and that sometimes we have guidance or referrals, but it's going to keep you open to the program that's going to work for you. And then if you are approved, you know, like I said, the first step is to apply, and it's free. And the reason we keep that application free is so that you have the freedom to explore our program and not feel obligated to move forward, or like you've already invested some and you might as well continue forward. We want families not only to be accepted into our program with our confidence, but we want to work with people who have confidence in us. And
yes.
So when you apply, if you're approved, just know that you're taking that next step to learn more specifically about your adoption search and what Lifetime could look like for your future family's goal. And then if the application, you know, if you get a response back asking for more information or more clarity, or if we let you know that there's not an opening at this time, again, don't look at it as a rejection. Think of it maybe more as, I am being saved and protected for a program that's right for me, that's right around the corner, that I will find to help me find my baby.
Yes. And I was kind of like, ooh, when you mentioned application fee, because on that report I was reading, I think it said that the average cost for applications, like to apply, was between $150 and $600. That was what they found in the survey of these adoptive parents who adopted in, I think, 2012, 2013, that they had paid to find out if someone can help them. And that's very common in the adoption realm of private adoption and working with agencies and so forth, that, you know, the adoption professional will not typically spend time exploring your adoption needs and sharing about their program with you unless you pay some sort of a fee. And that's the way they're structured. But Marty Caldwell, who was our founder, she's an adoptive mom herself, and she knows what it feels like to go through that process of being chosen. And she wanted to create a program and an environment where people are free, like Libby said, to explore. And the last thing Marty would want is any of us offering to assist a family that it's not feasible for them to be successful in our program. The last thing she would want is for us not to honor our commitments we already have to other families that are similar, that maybe have a limiting factor in common. And it's not that that's going to stop you from adopting. We may see families with that characteristic adopt. It's just that they're already with us and waiting. So it's nothing personal. It's just that we particularly at this space and time with specifically Lifetime don't have an opening available. It doesn't mean you won't adopt. It's nothing personal. Also, I think sometimes families mistakenly think that when we are not able to offer to assist and their application is not approved, I think sometimes families mistakenly think that they are not approved to adopt. And that's not true at all.
Yeah.
It's not anything based on home study or anything like that.
Absolutely. You know, you just said that so well. I always think about that too, Kim, and I know that we've even had those conversations with families before. The same can go for if you have been through a failed adoption before, whether it's through Lifetime or before coming to Lifetime. Sometimes that insecurity comes in where you're thinking, maybe I'm just a bad fit for all birth mothers. But the reality is that even if you had just one mother decide that she couldn't go through with the adoption, it most likely was not about you to begin with. She probably actually thinks they will be amazing parents. So in this field, in these stories that are being created through adoption, you really have to get your confidence on and know this is on my heart for a reason, and there are answers that are going to help me find the next step. And so that's what we love about having these Q&As, is because we can really kind of hop around all kinds of different topics. And also I hope that it encourages you too, because whether you've already applied and you're considering Lifetime, or you're just beginning your research, or if you're already waiting with Lifetime, you're all in a position of what if. What if I don't get approved? What if a birth mother doesn't choose me? What if I can't get money together? What if, what if, what if, what if, what if? And you could go on for days with that. But you have to start looking at, what if it does work?
Yes.
You know, what if the money comes together? Like, are you going to say yes? Because some families don't know if they're going to say yes. So pat yourself on the back for knowing that you showed up at a webinar that a lot of people sign up for, but only, some people actually make it live, and that's for different reasons. But a lot of times I think it's because they kind of psych themselves out. Adoption seems like such a huge thing, but all of you on the call are digesting it bite by bite. You're taking the time to go step by step and either stay prepared or to become prepared, and that's only going to serve you well.
There was a question that I kind of wanted to bring up, even though you've been corresponding while you've been talking somehow, or maybe while I was talking. What if a birth mom can't find a match in the program? Well, there is a specific path that we typically follow. We will exhaust all options of trying to find a family within Lifetime for the birth mom. And maybe she can't find a family because there's something specific going on that is harder to match. Maybe there's a special need, maybe it's the age of the children, maybe it's the quantity of children, or maybe it's because of what she's looking for, like a vegan family that's musical. That's going to narrow it down quite a bit. I know I'm not alone in steak being my favorite food, so yeah, a vegan family is not as common. But she's going to have her own set of criteria, and we want to find that for her. And if we're not finding them right off the bat, maybe we can ask her to consider the different things that are limiting the amount of families that she can, look at. And, I mean, we have a whole process to completely exhausting the path of finding a family within our program. And before we ever go outside of our contracted Lifetime families, we usually will send an email out to people that could possibly meet what that birth mom or birth father is looking for, and then gives our contracted families the chance to step forward even though it may not have been in their preferences. There's no expectation on a family to move forward, but they're just getting an email that we're sending to pretty much everybody. If that doesn't work out, then we will probably look at families who have already applied and seem to fit the criteria and are in the stage of their adoption where this could possibly work, make special arrangements to have that family become a part of our program because this birth mom, needs a family. After that, I would say we would go to our social media and encourage people to apply, because we just need to find families that meet these characteristics or that are open to this specific thing. So I can't think of any cases where we haven't been able to find a match for someone. I mean, yeah. Like really in the end,
I can think,
has that,
yeah, in the end it's come together, yes.
In the end, it usually, comes together.
And, one of the things, like this week I spoke with a woman, because it is a birth mother's choice, and we will present families to a birth mother, and if she's due really soon, a lot of times we're trying to look at, are they ready to go now? And not all families are, whether they're in the early phases or if something's come up and they're unable to move forward with a very fast opportunity. But, sometimes we show families to birth mothers and they still find a family online and say, but I love this family and they didn't show up in my list. And there could be reasons like, well, gosh, they literally just started and
they don't have a home study yet, and your baby's due in a week.
Completed. Yeah. And this birth mother was actually like, I don't care. It's my first pregnancy. I'm likely to go overdue. Can they get stuff together quickly? I mean, so what we didn't tell her no. We called the family to find out what are the possibilities, what are the realities of what we're facing here so that we can help her know what to expect, and then she can decide if that's what she wants to do.
Yes.
So,
and now I know we're out of time here, but I know that it's very important to our social workers and birth mom coordinators that families understand that when you are fully activated in our program, you are on call. Now, in the very beginning, in the first couple of months of being active in the program, if you don't have your home study done yet, that's okay. We're normally not going to approach you with something before your home study is in our hands, but it's very important for you to start that home study within the first couple of weeks because we know it's going to take 2 months. And so we're normally not going to expect you to move forward with an adoption if you don't have your home study in our hands. But if you've been in the program or you have a home study and you're active, that's you telling us we're ready to adopt at any moment. And if you've not started your program yet or maybe haven't started your home study, talk with us, please, about how you want to pace your adoption and when you know you're going to be ready to be to be on call. Because if you have a home study and you are active in our program, we see you as on call. So do birth moms. We tell them, hey, all you have to do is pick the family and they'll be there. And we need to know that the families know that that's expected of them because it's really hard on a birth mom if she gets rejected because the family says, well, we're not, it's not the right time for us.
right. And that's why, we're going to have more adoption story webinars coming up in April. Truly, that's why I encourage all of you, go to adoptionteleconference.com and check out different adoption stories because you can hear those memories from people who said, yeah, we had to get it together in a flash, or then there were other people that said, well, I was ready. I was ready for a year until I was chosen, and just all kinds of different timelines, different reasons that these mothers chose these adoptive parents. Each story is unique and will help you learn and think about things you may not have thought about yet. I love hearing from lifetime parents who have actually told me that through webinars and listening to other people's stories that they actually started hashing out hypothetical situations they never even imagined could happen. And so then they followed a lead, talking about, well, what would we do if our story was like that? Would we be ready? Would we say yes? Who would we get to watch the dogs? And who would we get to water the grass so that it didn't turn brown for the landlord or whatever, just starting to talk about and dreaming about and planning about the moment it's going to happen because it will. It will happen. And the different adoption stories and the different webinars bring up topics that just keep you talking about it, keep it going in your mind so that you're not feeling as clueless when the opportunity comes. You're not feeling like you're just staring with your mouth open thinking, I didn't expect this. Instead, you're thinking, I expected this to happen, and I'm ready with several different game plans of how this can play out.
Yes.
So just remember that a big part of what Lifetime does is we are here to walk you through that. We never expect people to begin the process or even begin a match and then just go off on their own and figure it out. That's very much what we are about. We are about hand in hand, walking through each process, each step, educating you, preparing you, supporting you, getting you the right answers, the right help to make the most of this time and have a safe and smooth and successful adoption process.
Yes, absolutely.
So we've got some good questions. I know, Kim, we probably won't be able to get to tonight, like the difference between agency and facilitator, or the difference between a foster care home study and a private adoption home study. And I know that we have talked about some of these things before, but again, what I want to encourage all of you is that if we had a question we weren't able to get to tonight, please reach out to us too, because we're happy to give you one-on-one answers, even if we're answering the same question for several of you.
Yes.
We are here to help. So you can
always do not let that question hang in the air unanswered. Send it to us directly, and then we can reply, or just give us a call and we can answer it for you.
Yes. And if you don't have a coordinator at Lifetime, you can write to adopt@lifetimeadoption.com, and we'll get it to the person who will be able to answer that best for you.
Mm-hmm. And like we said in the beginning of our webinar, if you are brand new to Lifetime, a good first step, no matter where you are in your process, is to fill out our free application online at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. And in the meantime, keep getting to know us by participating or at least observing conversations on Facebook. There's a whole community there and many conversations ongoing with adoptees, birth parents, adoptive parents who have already adopted. Maybe they're back for a next adoption or they're just starting out like maybe you are. And that Facebook page is at facebook.com/open.adoption. And you can always listen to more of our recorded webinars at adoptionteleconference.com. That's adoptionteleconference.com if you want to listen to some of the stories that Libby mentioned, previous Q&A sessions. It's all there for you. Just go to adoptionteleconference.com and just scroll down and you'll see a variety of different audio programs you can listen to. Of course, it's all free. You know, they're just adoption resources there waiting for you.
Absolutely. Well, Kim, I'm grateful to have had you here tonight. You and I have been typing with people, but I've also seen a lot of great feedback to things that you've been helping to explain, and I'm glad to have you here as always. But I am also very grateful to all of you who took the time to type your questions and your comments in because it really fueled our webinar and moved it forward. But also it just helps us to know more about what you might need on future webinars or literature or support too. So thank you all for being here, whether you typed or listened in. We know that you were a part of making tonight's webinar a great resource for the rest of the audience too. So I hope that it was helpful, and I hope that you'll keep in touch and let us know how you're doing with your research and if there's anything that we can answer for you or do to help you move your progress towards the baby you're hoping to meet through adoption. So Kim, is there anything you want to add before we wrap up tonight?
Nope. I think you covered it. Thank you all for being with us. Great questions tonight. Great crowd we had here, and hope you guys have a good rest of your night. Until next time, we will talk to you soon.
Great. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.